So we have a 32-year-old man who decides to go to the sex store with his mama to meet his virgin wife overseas, where he too is going to lose his virginity. And then we have a 40-year-old veterinarian who cries out of crucial conversations. This I could only be talking about none other than Sheena and Forrest. This is one of the couples for 90 Day Fiance before 90 days. This is part of my series where I'm going through all the couples and giving my thoughts and opinions that you just might not have heard elsewhere regarding what we have seen from this season. And there is definitely a lot to get into with this. So, welcome to Socially Single, y'all. So, let's get into it. All right. There is just some uncomfortable dynamics between these couples that make my temples hurt. um, and I hope I'm able to relate where I'm coming from with this because it's actually less about the couple, but more about the dynamics that surrounds this couple that really gets me really interesting. So for me, I would be honest, this was probably the most interesting couple to me for the season. And I really do have high hopes for this couple. I definitely would tell you off the rip that if you've seen the show and you've heard other people discuss how they're tired of Sheena's tears, I am so affected by Sheena's tears, so I might be a little biased in her favor if I'm being frank. But because I like Sheena, I do. I like Sheena. She big bone. She a big bone Filipino. She good. I like Sheena. No, Forrest alright, but I like Sheena. I don't know why I like Sheena, but I like Sheena. She got good teeth. Um, and but nonetheless, she doesn't get a free pass on some behavior that she exhibited throughout this time frame that I think she definitely needs to be held to the fire for sure. So that's it. Let me introduce these mofos. So we have Forrest, who was 32-year-old man from Oregon. He has autism and ADHD, so he does get disability, and he hasn't really held out on a real job in several years, as he claims due to his disabilities. And so, therefore, his mom actually put him in a Facebook group for people with sensitive needs, and she added him to the group, and that is where he met Sheena. Sheena is 40 years old, lives in the Philippines, of course, and she's a veterinarian, works 6 days a week, and she doesn't seem to have any life, to be honest, no kids. She's been a veterinarian for over 10 years, and they have been dating for 7 years. So perspective, she met Forrest when she was around 33 years old, and he met her when he was 25. So this is a pretty significant part of their young adulthood, where they have kind of been really investing all the time, energy into this relationship. But unlike what I said before about Anna Lynn and Javon and discussing that whole sunken fallacy, I do think that they just gravitated towards each other and they super serve each other's needs. Therefore, they, of course, fell in love. Now, how they've been managing the distance is Forrest put up a bunch of cameras in his house. And of course, he's one of those. We had someone else that did something very similar, right? I believe it was that other couple who was in the Philippines. The one that's not owning no more. Y'all know who I'm talking about. The guy with the glasses, weird self. I believe it was them. And so, anywho, she puts up cameras in his all over his place, his little apartment, and therefore Sheena is able to really look at him and view him anytime she wants, right? So that is how they stay in contact, and of course, and if it works for them, it works for them. I think it's very weird and creepy. It's a little bit stalkish, but I'm not in their relationship, so that works for y'all. Works for y'all. So that's how they kind of stay connected. And they, of course, did things on the cameras and all that fun stuff to spice things up. and they have fun. I definitely think I'm just saying off the rip. What I like about them is they both seem to have a lot, like a youthful aspect that some people definitely may consider to be childish. For especially for Sheena, as old as she is, like she loves the teddy bears. I wouldn't be surprised if they're both into like anime and characters. Like I can definitely see them being the couple who would dress up and go to some of the Comic Cons, or they might even be into that furry shit, and putting on the costumes and everything, because they both get with those little vibes, You remember they ain't virgin no more, but we'll get to that later on. So I definitely think that there's that kookiness and those quirks that they both have that they may not always feel comfortable sharing with others. And they don't discuss this on the show explicitly, but if Sheena was also a part of that group for people with sensitive needs, I don't think it's far fetched for us to think that Sheena herself might be on the spectrum in some way. And she just might have some anxiety things and or sensitivities that really do align very well with Forrest. And so it's not made very clear, but if we get into Sheena just a little bit longer and stay with me for a little bit, it's interesting. I gotta say that Sheena is 40 years old. She's in a very populated place in the Philippines. And she seems to have a well-to-do job. And I know that obviously that the income looks different in the Philippines, and even maybe the prestige possibly looks different in the Philippines than it does versus the same roles being in America. But we don't meet any of Sheena's friends. Like it's as if she doesn't have any friends. She comes off as maybe even like a homebody. And at 40 years old, she's also, going to be a virgin. We don't really hear much about her past relationships, if she ever had any relationships. I think she did allude to the fact that this was like her first real relationship. And so I really do wonder about the history of Sheena 32 and younger. Like, what was her life? Because, when we have met people from the Philippines, and I don't know if this is a production decision or not, we have typically seen them have some level of social lives regardless. Like, it's not like, whether they're in some of the super more poor rural parts or they're in the more popular part. Like there's other things going on. And with Sheena, it just, it's interesting to me that we didn't really get into that. And I think that whatever sensitivity that she has that made her eligible for the group or attracted her to that group are exhibited through some of her behaviors that we see within this season between them. So that's not to give either one of them a pass, because the reality is, whether you have a disability or not, if you're choosing to participate in society, you're going to still be held to the norms of society. You don't always get the pass because of your disability. So, and from my understanding, that's not what y'all want in the first place. Those who, are there and who do get it, we don't really want to be pacified in that sense anyway. So we won't do it today. But I will be lying if I didn't say that it kind of just made me give a little bit, I'm overusing the word sensitivity. But I am a little bit more biased to maybe giving Sheena a little bit more of a break, because it wasn't necessarily discussed on the show regarding her situation or her past or even possible traumas that she has been through. But it definitely seems that she's been through some trauma. Let me digress. So there is literally a hippo in the room that I want to talk about, and that's Molly. Molly is Forrest's mom. And they have I really want to call it an unhealthy relationship, but why I felt that way in the beginning, because this is the first couple that we are introduced to and we get to meet at the beginning of the show, of the season. And while I think that it's a bit unhealthy, it might be necessary in certain ways. So, you know, this is one time where I'm choosing not to be too judgmental on it, but Molly does have some unorthodox ways that makes the relationship very cringe. That I would love to see her just elevate from. I'll use those words. So, what do I mean? What do I mean, V? So, like when it comes to the fact that before Forrest gets to go to the Philippines, we find out that apparently he found her magazine collection, right? And her naughty collection. And so what did she do? When he's 17, 18, take him to sex shop, buy him his own magazines. On one hand, I understand not shying away from certain topics. On the other hand, I am like, do you have to share that with us though? Like, just like, and then of course she took him to the sex shop and all that to kind of get some things for Sheena and everything else, and it was just like, you know what? I'm glad you're being supportive. Maybe he needs this, but I I get the feeling that he'll be just fine. He could have done this part on his own, even if he did fudge it all up. So of course, let me move on. Molly has her husband named Dev, and Dev seems to, he's awkward. Dev is awkward. Let's call it thing. And then Dev be out to lunch. Okay, his elevator, it just go. I think that, and I know I'm no doctor, but I am in a relationship to a couple, and I feel like that maybe possibly he may have had a stroke in his past. Therefore, that to account for some of the minimal struggles in communication that we may see from Dev. That's not to shame him at all whatsoever. It's just an observation I'm making. Like I'm making for Sheena. Like Sheena may not have been diagnosed with anything. I just think that she possibly might be on the spectrum as well, given some of the ways in which she responds to things. So, but Dev is cool. And against Dev, it's Molly who I have an issue with. So, Molly makes it very clear that her problem with Sheena is that they're putting all this pressure on Sheena, and this is a very large part of their storyline, that Sheena is supposed to be saving up this money over the years so that way she can come to America. And of course, this is not something that we find very common on the show, right? Usually it's the American's responsibility to front that cash and to be able to afford to bring someone over into this country. It's not very often where we have seen that they're putting the ownership and accountability on the immigrant to finance or contribute heavily to them coming over. I know this may be the first time this has happened. Like I said, I'm not an expert on a fiance like that. So this could have been something that has happened in the past. It is just the first time that I've seen it be this overt, especially with the given audacity of you don't hold a job, you get the disability, and you want her to pay for your way to come, pay for her way to come in here to be with you. That's a new one for me. So for me, I could be late. I'm late. I'm late a lot. So maybe I'm late. So, and Molly is also making this a point of the storyline because Forrest has been over to Indonesia in the past, pursuing a different young lady, and he ended up being scammed. We don't know what fully happened with that scenario. We don't even really get any pictures, but apparently he did make his way over there. And she took him for all that he got, and he was, in a certain situation, and then Molly had to, of course, he got him back home. So it's a sore topic, clearly, amongst Forrest and Molly, where that had happened. So for her, this is why she's going with him to the Philippines this time, because of the fact of She wants to hopefully prevent Forrest from being impulsive in his actions and making quick decisions that can inevitably hurt him again. So totally understandable, very logical, and it truly does make sense. So we get over there, and when Forrest and Sheena met, it was so cute and authentic. And I love me a good meeting, and I love me a good ending at the airport. And just like I love me a good marriage, like the fiance, I think like those are some of the most pivotal moments of the actual show itself. And it was very much authentic for me to see them meeting. And I want to also bring up the point that I do think that this is one of the most authentic couples, if not the most authentic couple of the show. And in my opinion, sometimes with people on the spectrum, they don't fake very well. Not saying that they can't lie. Let me be very frank. Not saying that they cannot lie and that they cannot act. It's just they usually don't have it to do with being inauthentic or trying to put on. That's too much for their minds or how it's wired. So I am definitely allowing myself to be gullible and naive in the thought of what I saw throughout this between this storyline was relatively authentic, if I'm being honest. So when Molly was ready to kind of hold Sheena to the fire, and when she saw Sheena and her, there was such a cry to where it's like, oh my God, Sheena was definitely ready to meet Molly, and Molly was ready to meet Sheena, and so was that everybody was crying tears of joy to meet each other, especially after them traveling through 3 different flights to get there. It was a very special moment. It really, really was, and I was really, really happy to see that. So Sheena had already got them a place to stay, and it was not a great place. It was a 2-bedroom hotel room, and the walls were too close together. I would not have been comfortable in that space. But I understand that she probably only has so much to work with, and this is clear, and it's clear that Forrest's family doesn't come from a family of means themselves, and that's no offense to them. Not saying that they're a certain stereotype that I just won't use. But it's just clear that they're not a family of means. I think they're definitely working class and doesn't have all the money to kind of be thrown around, for sure. Especially given how much is brought up in their storyline. So, I like the fact that Sheena stood out to me out of most people in the season to where. And I didn't give credit to these people in every one of their videos with other couples, but she is very knowledgeable and in my opinion did a very good job being that tour guide, not only for Forrest but for Molly and Deb as well. Like she really embraced them and shared her culture and took them to different places and so on and so forth, and that just felt very wholesome is where I'm looking for. I like seeing those moments beyond, the issues that we're going to be discussing in a moment between them, of seeing her share her story, share about the history and take them places and be excited about it. And Molly and all of them are trying different fruits and different things and so on and so forth. That's the part that I really, really do love. Like I said in an earlier video that one of the reasons why I watch 90 Day Fiancé is I like to hear the immigrant talk about their country and they show us little pockets of things that just may not come up in a touristy place, and you're getting to learn more about their way of living and their lifestyle that they're accustomed to. That is one of the reasons why I watch 90 Day Fiancé. I know that's not a documentary necessarily directly on that country, but it's very interesting to hear and to see that. And so I really was satisfied through this whole process of how Sheena handled things with that aspect to being a very good tour guide for them and being very consistent in sharing that history and that culture. So let's get into the bullshit. So Molly, really wants to address why Sheena has not been saving money to come to the States. And, Forrest and Molly have this expectation that because she's working and everything, it's her responsibility to do certain things. And but also they have this air about themselves of like, but because you're in the Philippines, you surely must live worse than we do because you're in a poor country. So therefore, you need to come over to the States to be with us instead. And Forrest really had himself built up to believe that he had to save Sheena and be her knight in shining armor, or plastic armor, and save her from her mean old parents because they're taking all their money away from her. And she told them that. And so, and Sheena did have a dislike that, kept up, well, I'm going to say lie, that her family was taking all her money and therefore she could not save up. And so, and because of that, that's why she didn't have the money that she had been on that she did save up for them. And so, and there is this, and Molly and Forrest have this entitlement to her money, which I think in itself is super unhealthy and should not exist, in a relationship at all whatsoever. I'm not sure how they should feel entitled at all, but that's definitely something that we get to experience and see a bit. And so we kind of go a little bit further into the storyline about, of course, the big to do with them is going to be not on them losing their virginity to each other, which I'm not going to get deep into because I think it's a little bit too TMI. However, meeting the parents, right? Because that is a big part of both of their storylines, both of their stories. You have Molly and Forrest, and you have Sheena and her dad and her family, right? And while her family is not necessarily on the screen a lot of the time as much as Molly and Dev is for obvious reasons, it's clear that they also have a hold on Sheena, right? So jumping to the point where I'm at. Molly confronts Sheena's parents when she meets the parents. Now, I'm definitely skipping past some things that I'll go back to y'all, but I really want to get this point out. And Molly and Sheena does not do well with confrontation. And so something within her life has told her that if I cry and I show so much emotion, that would be enough to get me out of this conversation. You'll have pity upon me. And I got to give it to Molly. Molly was like, a bitch, I see through you. Listen, I about did what you was doing for a long time, girl. Listen, I'm not new to this. I'm so true to this where I make sure that you can't do nothing with this, okay? So, no. And I do think that Sheena has a problem being effectively communicative about what's really going on. But we gotta be honest here. There is a very clear expectation in her culture from what we have seen, not only from other Filipino families or other areas in different countries, but it is clear that her family expects her to contribute, and we don't know how much, but she calls herself the breadwinner of the household. So, what am I referring to? We find out that Sheena's family has two properties. Sheena has her own apartment that she stays in, a way that we don't really kind of go to during the trip. We see a glimpse of it at the very beginning when we meet Sheena. And then they have their own property, family, which is like three stories. And it has a huge yard, pool, banana pools and all kind of stuff, and hammocks and everything. It's a beautiful property that one just would not have expected to have seen in the Filipinos. It was a beautiful property. It was very well maintained, and they run it as like an Airbnb or a bed and breakfast. So that's how the family, survives. So they worked on it and done a little bit by a little bit by a little bit over the years. And now they have, and now of course that's part of their income is renting out this property. So in my mind, a lot of those updates have kind of come from because as the parents have gotten older, I'm sure they could not work the way they may have worked in the past that allowed them to get what they have. And she didn't have made a comment about how, hey, when they first got it, it was a wreck. So they have spent a lot of money really building this up and doing repairs and renovations throughout the years. So with Sheena being a veterinarian for 10 years, and she claims to only make $500 a week, which I don't know, but that could very well be true. She did say that her parents owns her apartment, and the reason why Forrest and her could not stay at her apartment is because they were not married. And since her parents owns her apartment, they have the final say, which is why she had found another place for the Ford and to stay in when they came. So this is definitely a success story, right? In the sense to where, they are as accomplished as they are in the area. And we, of course, don't know exactly how accomplished or what their situation is. We just know it's a beautiful piece of property. And Molly and Forrest are like, y'all living better than me. And that should not be the case. It's kind of how they were really acting, especially Molly, like, y'all don't deserve to live like this. How could you live like this and you can't afford something? Like, it was a very, very entitled, judgy attitude that was completely immature on Molly's part, for sure. And so, but while it was addressed, when Molly kind of do it, of course, we find out the parents, we don't meet Sheena's mom, all right? She is sick, so we only have the sister, who I believe was the younger sister, and we have the father. And those are the two who represent the family in this situation. So it's interesting because Molly kind of busts Sheena out, she told us all these horrible things about you, and you are the worst people in the world. How dare you require as much of her? And they're like, well, if she just needed the money to do X, Y, and Z, we can work it out. We'll happen. I don't know where she's coming from with this. And Sheena's like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And yes, I lied. I was wrong. They're great people. They're not horrible people, so on and so forth. So it's clear that Sheena, I do believe, has an interesting relationship with the truth. Okay? I do think that she has a interesting relationship with being truthful, which is part of her communication issue. However, I also believe that what we saw while she was at the family house, her father, both of their parents gaslight their children to manipulate them to believe and to control the narrative at which they should follow, right? Which is to their benefit. I don't believe that while Forrest might be independent, I don't believe he is so independent to where he does not depend on Molly to handle certain things, and Molly does not benefit from whatever resources and income that he gets. If you get what I'm trying to say, work with me. When it comes to Sheena and her family, her father pulled her into a one-on-one after that conversation, was like, not only do you need to contribute and help out, but you need to make sure Forrest knows that he's going to also have to contribute, and he too is also going to have to help out. That's the culture. Is he wrong? I don't know if it's not a question of right or wrong, but I think that there should have been better communication, because this is also one of the few times, which we don't get at all this season, by the way, is there is no discussion of dowries this season, I don't think. And there is some discussion about, the American having to pay the family in some way for the honor of marrying their child, their relative. So we don't really get a lot of that, if any, this season, which kind of lends itself to a little bit more of the inauthentic nature in certain cases. But as I digress, I do think that there's expectations that Sheena knows that her family has, and her family is not going to budge on that she has not let Forrest in on, because she ultimately knows that Forrest can't afford it. So what is her solution to it? I'll just do it myself. I'll just pay for myself. I'll just pay for myself. If that's where they keep the peace, I'll get this to you, and I'll figure out this whole situation with this, because it's not really a solid deal. She knows she has her family, and if I had to guess, Her family has had to be a very pivotal support system in her life for her to get to where she even was when she met Forrest. So I think that, there is definitely dependent vibes there that is expected of her. That while she said that she lied about them being mean and all that, I don't think she was far off. I think that there was some element of truth truly in that conversation when she said that, but she just didn't relate like that. And then it kind of, we allowed Molly to really change the narrative behind what she was trying to say, right? So I wanted to kind of bring that point because that was a big part of those two. And here's the thing about Forrest. I'm not, I like Sheena, but I'm not the, Forrest. Yeah, all right. I'm going to need Forrest to grow the fuck up. I'm gonna be frank with that. Um, there were moments when Forrest was able to put Molly in her place, like when she was like trying to get them to talk about their first night if they did the nookie nookie. The job to the nookie nookie. You gotta nookie nookie. You gotta give me the nookie nookie. And it was just so cringe and inappropriate. Even if that's the way in which you and him may have like a very candid way of having conversations, it was highly disrespectful and highly inappropriate to do that in front of his significant other, his person. And quite honestly, I would, I don't think you should do it in front of your husband, but if he's cool with it, have at it. He's been around since Forrest was a kid, apparently. So, it is what it is. He's used to all this, but for the fact that you're doing it in front of someone you just met is absolutely disrespectful. And that's the part of white audacity that I kind of want to just bring up a little bit to where you just don't read the room and you kind of move with this privilege and audacity that you just think everyone is okay with, and they're not, and it's not okay. That is never okay. And it was clear and that Sheena and Forrest were embarrassed and did not want to discuss it. And Forrest did check his mother. And I'm going to say, I know Forrest has ADHD and autism, but let me tell you something. Forrest ain't that goddamn autistic. He ain't that goddamn, his ADHD don't hit that hard. He may have some struggles. However, I have worst in my family, and as someone, I'm not an expert on autism help. Bitch, I might be on the spectrum if I'm being quite frank with you. You see how I talk. However, he ain't that goddamn autistic. And so because Forrest can move when he wants to move mentally, right? Like he can see between many lines, and he has enough wherewithal at his 32 years of age to address certain things. The problem with Forrest is he hasn't matured to the point of creating boundaries with his mother and maintaining those. And that is what we mostly see, which is the biggest problem between Sheena and Forrest, is they don't know and they have not been given the tools. They have not been raised with the tools to draw boundaries within their parental relationships that allow them to thrive as independent, self-sustaining adults. That is the issue that is the problem. And if I'm gonna get a little bit deeper, as someone who is not a parent, I'm gonna go ahead and say it. It would not serve Molly's nor Sheena's parents' best interest to have taught them those boundaries for them to be more self-sustaining. It would not. Molly likes being the controlling person that it is. And Forrest, to be clear, is someone, while he did check his mother, don't think that I don't see that Sheena herself is not, I do think that Sheena herself likes that she has a power dynamic over Forrest too. So, but I think that it works for him because I think Forrest, that is a role that he's willing to have. He's willing to be her big teddy bear. He's willing to be this quote unquote protector, even though he did not protect her when he needed to do so. In so many cases, as we saw, he could have spoke up and he did not. He rather let her have her feet to the fire, but I digress. They have problematic relationship with their parents. And they don't know how to draw boundaries saying, hey, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do it. And if I fail, then I fail. That's not to say that my parents are wrong. They could be right all day long, but sometimes you have to kind of go through your own journey and path to learn what you need to learn to be a proper grown woman and a grown man and an adult. And that's what we are seeing here as a problem here. That's the biggest thing. Now, people have definitely expressed, and I have seen, the situations where Sheena ultimately wants Forrest to move to the Philippines. And I do think that Sheena wants to use Forrest as a method to stand up to her parents. I definitely think that Sheena got some boss ways about her too, to be clear. Like I'll say, okay, Sheena had some moments where she was like, while she normally cries and run, I'm like, when she went to stand and stuff like, Sheena is small. She was like, no, I'm big. I got childbearing hips. Like, you ain't finna come in here and run my household. Like, no, this is my man. And I think that she's 40, right? So she has about 8 years of experiences on Forrest. That Forrest might have yet not understood. So I don't want to frame Sheena as this helpless person because she cries and who can't do it. I know we've seen points where they both stood up for each other. However, they need to start setting up for themselves proactively with those people to draw healthier boundaries for themselves. I definitely think that, near the end of this, once we get past the whole money thing, their storyline becomes just a much more natural storyline. She admits that she was sorry and she lied. And of course, that was not okay. I'm not saying lying is okay. I'm also saying, because two things can still be true. Lying is wrong. I do think that Sheena needs to find better ways to communicate the issues because, quite frankly, I think her delivery of what she was going through, like I said, was not the best way to deliver what dynamics that she has to adhere to for her family, for Forrest to understand. And that's on Sheena's fault. That is Sheena's fault. But we do see where near the end where Forrest is just like, I gotta do better. I need to be a man. I need to get myself a job, and I need to do what I need to do to take care of my woman. And it's interesting because we get the part where they consider if Forrest is able to move to the Philippines. And like I said, Sheena really preferred for Forrest to move to the Philippines because she can work there. And in her mind, I'll do all I can to take care of you and so forth and so forth, which I'll be honest, I do believe that. I think if Forrest moved over to the Philippines, I don't think it would be a disaster per se. But I do think that it will be harder for Forrest to assimilate than what Sheena and Forrest are able to think about. And as wrong as Molly has been, a broken clock can be right twice a day. And I do think that Molly was right. One of the things Molly had said was, what the fuck you look like moving over to the Philippines when you ain't got no job? Why would you give your disability benefits? Like, if you want to do all this and get into programs, get into some resources, let's get you skilled up so that way you can get a job and maintain a job. Now, the question I have is, why has that not been done in the 7 years of the relationship this whole time? You feel me? Like, if he could have been doing that all at this point, what changed? But you know what? If Molly him meeting Molly and him getting some punani is what allowed him to be like, you know what? I done got me a taste now. So, shit, I feel like I can give me a job. All right, mama, if that's what it took, go for it, right? Go for it. And that's kind of where we end off at with. So I'm looking forward to see exactly how Sheena and Forrest are definitely doing at the tell all. I'm looking forward to seeing them. I don't think there's anything more that we're going to necessarily find out regarding that situation. Because I think it was pretty cut and dry, honestly, what we were looking for. I mean, what we were seeing. But like I said, as much as a mess as it was, I'm glad that Sheena was in a motivation for Forrest. And I hope that they find their way. I think that when we saw them together, just being together, it was really cute. It was really sweet. As corny as Forrest is, and listen, neither one of them is my aesthetic cup of tea. However, they are each other's cup of tea, and quite frankly, that's how it should be. I think he loves him some she, and she loved him some Pookie Bear. Let them to, figure out their relationships. I hope that they get into counseling and therapy at some point individually to help build more, learn how to communicate better and to learn how to build stronger boundaries in a way in which is compatible with their way of thinking and their sensitivities. But they're going to have to draw boundaries and cut themselves off from their parents and their families if they ever want to live the life that I think they truly are looking to live. Anyway, y'all, I'm sorry this is long. I definitely had some thoughts about this particular couple for sure. I like them. I'm hoping the best for them for sure. I hope that you enjoyed this and was able to get some feedback. I would love to hear your feedback downtown in those comments. And I look forward to seeing what y'all putting down there. Do y'all think Molly is too involved? Did you agree with what I had to say? Or if you disagree, hey, share your discourse. I'm always looking for different perspectives. I want to understand because I do not know it all. I'm just kind of coming from one place. Again, I'm socially single. It's me talking to a camera because I got nobody else to talk to. All right, y'all. Don't forget to hit the like button if you enjoyed this. Please subscribe and stay socially single, and I'll see you soon. Take care.